Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 2, just aired. This episode brings all the characters together to prepare for the battle against the Night King in Winterfell. I'm gonna let anyone that might be new to this channel know beforehand that I am a bigger fan of the A Song of Ice and Fire books, which the show is based on, than the show itself. So be warned, my perspective on things might be somewhat biased, but I will try to be as objective as possible. This review will be split into 3 sections: pros, cons, and final musings and rating. Let's start with the pros. Right off the bat, I'll say that this episode was much stronger than the first. Better dialogue, better character interactions. I for one really enjoyed the Night's Watch reunion. It was good to see Sam, Jon, and Dolorous Edd together again, and also paying homage to their fallen brothers. It was a great moment, and finally Sam stands up for himself a bit. He was indeed the first in thousands of years to kill a White Walker. He deserves some respect. Speaking of respect, Sam giving Heartsbane to Jorah was very touching. Jorah was denied his family's ancestral sword, and Sam gave away his of his own free will. I thought it was a wonderful moment. We also get to see Ghost in this episode. He didn't do much, but at least they acknowledge his presence. I was beginning to think that he was gone for good. Another one of my favorite parts in this episode was all of the interactions between Dany and Sansa. I love this rivalry. I live for it. Dany's look when Sansa disagreed with her in court could freeze over hell. And the scene with the two of them together was great as well. The entire time I could tell that Sansa was not buying Dany's flowery words. I could see it in her eyes that she was waiting to say something. And when she started speaking about how the North would not bend to the Iron Throne and Dany moved her hand away, it became obvious that unless one of them dies, this conflict will outlast the war between the living and the dead. Sansa will 100% challenge the Iron Throne's claim to the North. Directly related to this was the great scene where Jon tells Dany the truth about who he is. She clearly does not want to believe it, and can you really blame her? I wonder if Dany will continue to trust Jon after this point. She already had what Sansa said to her in mind, but now that Jon has said this, what if she thinks that they are both working against her? Dany even says to Sansa earlier, who manipulated who? I'm very interested and invested into seeing how all of this plays out. This episode also had a singing moment, and as a big fan of Lord of the Rings, I couldn't help but notice a similarity between Podrick singing the Jenny of Oldstone song and Pip singing to Theoden in Return of the King. It was a tear-jerking moment for sure. You really get the sense that in this episode, many are going to be gone in the next. Now we get to my top moment in the whole episode. I loved in the beginning of this episode when Brienne stood up for Jaime, but their final scene together in this episode takes the cake. Brienne of Tarth has been one of my favorite characters in this entire series, book and show, ever since I read A Feast for Crows. My hope for her, as one of the only truly honorable characters in this entire thing, has always been that she could achieve her dream and become a knight, because she deserves it. In this episode, it happened, and it only made sense that Jaime was the one to knight her. And Gwendoline Christie did a fantastic job in this scene, and you can truly see how happy Brienne is in this moment. Never before has there been a character that deserved it more, in my opinion. I love this scene. I cried in this scene. It gave me so much of what I needed, and I'm so happy that this was in the show. Those were my pros of this episode, and now it's time to get to my cons. And before you go pressing the dislike button, I just want to say that there aren't many cons, and the ones that I do have are mostly minor. In fact, I'll go in order from most minor to most severe. First off, did Dany need to make a joke about Jon being short? Isn't that slightly problematic? I can't help but think that if this show was constantly pointing out the appearance of a female actor, then people would be upset. But if Kit Harington is okay with it, then who am I to complain? Like I said, Minor issue. Next minor con. Davos says in this episode that he went his whole life without being involved in a battle until he survived the Battle of the Bastards. Hello? Blackwater? Where your son died? Where you almost died? Did you forget? I just thought it was a little weird that he would refer to the Battle of the Bastards as his first and not Blackwater. I guess he didn't technically fight in Blackwater, but his ship totally got blown up by wildfire. Again, minor con though. Not episode breaking or anything. Before I say my last con, and most severe con, I want to be clear that this is a personal problem. So, that being said, I won't take points off the episode for it. I want to make it clear that this is based more in the subjective than the objective. I've always known that there was a possibility that Arya and Gendry would end up together, but seeing it in this episode kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It's just that I've always seen Arya as a child. I know Maisie Williams isn't a child, but Arya is supposed to be, right? I mean, time is a little shaky in the show, but Arya was like 10 when the show started, and Gilly's baby has been a newborn since like season 3, so she can't be more than 12, maybe 13, and Gendry was practically an adult the first time we saw him. So for me, personally, it's just a little weird. Now I know that everyone does not feel the same way. I know that some people really wanted to see this, and that's fine too. If I removed my own feelings from this all, I get it. They both might be dead in the morning. Arya doesn't want to die a virgin. It's understandable. Either way though, I'm glad she has her weapon now. It's time to kill some White Walkers. So those are my cons. I told you, minor cons. The episode was a little slow, but I don't need a whole section to talk about that. Lastly, let's get to my final musings and my rating. This was a good episode. I wasn't sure at first, but I watched it 3 times, and it grew on me. I'm no longer comparing this show to the first season. I don't want to hold it up to the same standard as the books. And for what it was, this episode did a lot of things right. I tweeted at first that I didn't think the episode was very good. But after seeing some of my loyal Twitter followers, many of which I highly respect, saying great things about this episode, I took it upon myself to reconsider. And I realized that my problem wasn't with the episode itself. The writing was pretty freaking solid. It was my Game of Thrones anxiety coming back up again. I think watching this episode, subconsciously I understood that many of these characters may soon be dead. It made me unable to enjoy a lot of it in the first go. It was hard to be happy in some of these moments, knowing what doom awaited them. Once I realized this, I understood that this episode wasn't bad. Not at all. This was actually one of the best episodes of Game of Thrones that we have seen in a really long time, and I was almost ashamed that I didn't see it at first. As someone who's such a huge fan of the books, I'm constantly looking at this show through the lens of a book reader, and sometimes I just have to take those lenses off and see the show for what it is itself and not judge it so harshly. That's why I'm not giving these episodes 3s and 4s like I did in season 6, because that was me judging it by a standard that the show never could possibly meet, and I see the flaw in that now. I'm certainly not saying that my criticisms weren't valid, because I think all of them were. But at this point, I've moved, and I'm still moving into a place where I can accept the show for what it is. Bran actually gave some pretty crucial details in this episode as well. The Night King wants to erase the world, delete the memory of mankind. Now that Bran possesses this memory, he is a key target. This lets us know more about what the Night King actually wants, but I'm hoping for a moment with the Night King himself that could provide us with something less vague. Bran says that the Night King has come to him many times with many different three-eyed ravens. I'm wondering if we will get some elaboration on that statement as well. The Grey Worm and Missandei romance was never something that I was really into, but in this episode I thought it was interesting that she mentions returning to Noth. This makes me think even more that Grey Worm is going to die. If they follow book canon, he couldn't live on Noth anyway because the butterflies would make him sick and kill him. So I think they're setting up his death in this battle to come. It's interesting that Theon and Sansa seem like they're pretty into each other as well. I wonder if she knows about his mutilation. It makes sense that Theon and Sansa could have feelings for each other. After all, he did save her from Ramsay. Also, I think Dany should have maybe chilled when it came to Jaime a bit. She knows what her father was. He was not a good king, and he deserved to die. Also, as I predicted, Bran does not care about what Jaime did to him. He is beyond all of it. It needed to happen. It was necessary for things to play out like they were supposed to play out. And so, this episode wraps up with the ultimate threat approaching. It was the quiet before the storm, and now the crap really, really hits the fan. This episode was a bridge between the opening and the coming battle, and it was done very well for what it was. My rating is 8.5 out of 10. This episode didn't get a higher rating from me because it did drag in a few places, and there was some filler. But I think that for the most part, this episode was very effective. Thank you guys for watching. Also, if you like my commentary on Game of Thrones, check out the book that I helped write along with Grey Area, History of Westeros, GOT Academy, and others. It's called The Thrones Effect, How Game of Thrones Conquered Pop Culture. It's available on Amazon right now. Link in the description. Also, check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. Leave your Q&A questions for this week in the comment section below beneath my comment. Thank you guys so much.